Hello my loyal companions, welcome back to the channel and to another complete rogue guide. Today we're going to be having a look at Scorch. In these videos I like to go over the rogues in depth, showing you their different weapons, abilities and perks, then give you an upgrade priority system so you know exactly what to buy when you're in game, and then finally giving you some playstyle tips so you can play them a little bit more effectively. If you do go on to enjoy the video or learn something new, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to the channel, but for now, let's get into it. Scorch is labelled as a duelist within this game due to her insane 1v1 potential. She's built for close range engagements, fighting in 1v1s and trying to decimate the enemies quickly so she can move on to the next target. Scorch can put out more DPS than basically every other rogue within this game, but she is limited to that shorter range potential due to her weapons. It's incredibly hard to win that 1v1 fight against Scorch, and this is due to the nature of her kit. Let's start with her passive called Fireproof. Very simple. Scorch is immune to fire. She is all about fire. That is what her abilities do with. She has an incendiary grenade, and so she is immune to this and also immune to any other fire damage from the enemy team that may come at her, as well as her own fire. This is particularly effective due to her main ability, which is called Overheat. When you activate Overheat for 10 seconds, your bullets cause fire damage to the enemies. This fire damage is 15 damage split across 3 ticks of 5 damage each. What this means is that when you land a bullet, it will do the normal damage it's meant to do, plus an additional 15 over a short duration. Now this doesn't mean that every bullet you hit does another 15 damage, because what happens is when you hit him with another bullet, it stops the previous burn and reapplies it. So when you're hitting someone with a very fast firing weapon and constantly reapplying the burn damage, you're not actually getting the full 15 damage because you're interrupting it every time. So it's actually benefits you if you miss some bullets because you'll do a little bit more damage. Generally though, every bullet does about 5 more damage, even if you are hitting them consistently. This ability, as I said, only lasts 10 seconds, so you want to be using it to the most of its potential, and we'll go over a little bit about that in the playstyle tips at the end. But this ability alone isn't useful unless you have the weapons to back it up, and Scorch's weapons really enable her in this sort of way up at the closest range, and that's what we're going to go on to now. The first of Scorch's primary weapons is the SLC, which is a submachine gun, a very fast fire SMG, meaning you can apply that burn damage very quickly, but also interrupt it due to the fast nature of the firing weapon. It is built for short range with really bad recoil as you go past the mid-range to long range, but does absolutely melt and has one of the fastest time to kills of any gun in the game. As you upgrade this to tier 1, you increase the magazine size from 30 to 40, at tier 2 you increase the hip fire accuracy, and at tier 3 you suppress its fire and reduce its recoil. Our other primary weapon is the Arbitrator, which is the 2-pump shotgun that Anvil has. It only has 2 rounds in it, but it does devastating damage, dealing 100 body damage at the closest range, which will be a 1-tap to those without armor or additional effects. As you upgrade this to tier 1, you increase the reload speed quite significantly. You then in tier 2 increase the hip fire accuracy and reduce its bloom, and at tier 3 you increase the damage range by a fair amount as well for a shotgun. Both of these weapons can deal a lot of damage. What I generally think is better though is the SLC, because the Arbitrator doesn't benefit as much from the additional burn damage with her main ability. I think the SLC helps you output a bit more damage using the ability, whereas the Arbitrator you're going for that one-shot kill anyway, so the additional burn isn't that useful. So preferably, and just for a bit more versatility in the playstyles you can do, maybe trying to do some poke damage at longer range, the SLC is better. But if you like to play with the Arbitrator, and particularly for Strikeout, I think that's a good weapon in those circumstances. Going on to her secondary weapons, her pistol is very unique. It's the only one of its kind, and it is the A3 Salvo, which is a 3-round burst pistol. This is actually really good for Scorch due to the fact that it's a 3-round burst, so it reapplies that burn damage quite often on those pistol rounds, and actually she probably has, in this instance, with her ability, the best pistol in the early game for round 1. It's not very consistent, but you can do a lot of DPS output compared to other guns with this weapon. At tier 1, when you upgrade it, you increase its magazine size from 18 to 24, and at tier 2, you increase its hipfire accuracy. The other secondary weapon is actually also really unique in itself. This is her melee weapon called Rosie. This is her prosthetic arm rather than the traditional axe baseball bat or katana. Rosie cannot be thrown and actually has the highest base body damage than any other melee weapon at the start before you upgrade it. It does 45 rather than 40. As you upgrade this weapon though, you increase the melee lunge distance, and at tier 2 you increase the damage that it does up to 55, which is only ever so slightly weaker than the baseball bat, but you do give it applying damage over time. You actually burn people with this even without your ability active, meaning in total you do 55 body damage at the upgrade and an additional 15 for that burn effect, so you do 70 damage, meaning it's actually the best. As for her gadgets, of course, she has an incendiary grenade. It makes so much sense for her kit to have that incendiary grenade. It throws down a big pool of fire that enemies can't walk within without taking damage at 10 per tick. At tier 1 you increase its radius, and at tier 2 you increase the duration of the fire. This is actually a really good piece of equipment. It can burn through certain walls, and of course Scorch can walk through it, which is a massive part of her kit. Other gadget is the EMP grenade, and this can disrupt and EMP enemies when they're thrown at them, or break certain pieces of equipment. As you upgrade to tier 1, you increase the EMP duration that enemies are affected with, and at tier 2 you can get a second EMP. As for the perks, in the 4000 category you have Berserker and Evade, in 6500 you have Tenacity and Nimble Hands, and at 10,000 you have Headstrong and Replenish. Let's now look at an upgrade priority system for Scorch so you know what to buy when you're in game. As usual, I've labelled these under high priority, which are things you should buy in this order, interchangeable, which are things you should get at some point but you can mess around with the order, and finally the low priority or situationals, which you don't really need to buy except for very particular circumstances. I also then have the rounds next to it, which are probably most applicable. I then have the rounds next to it, which you're most likely to buy these in, dependent on the money that you get throughout the rounds. Looking at the most noticeable features, the first thing I want you guys to almost always buy on Scorch is the incendiary grenade. This is a massive part of her kit. It allows her to do the fire damage, allows her to walk through it and get some cheeky flank routes off. The only other exception you could do here, if you're very worried and in comp, you could buy the EMP if they have a trench. That's the only other thing I would recommend buying, but even then I would think you should get that a little bit later on down the line. The incendiary grenade is just so important for her. You should then look at buying her primary weapon. For me, this will be the SLC almost every time. I think it's a great weapon, great dueling potential, and it's not as high risk as the Arbitrator and just a bit more versatile overall. You then for sure want to be picking up Tenacity. I think this is a massive part of anybody's kit. It's such a strong perk. It's core for everybody. You need to be getting Tenacity. Helps you survive a little bit longer against nades and pre-nades that may be coming your way. And especially as Scorch, who is very close range, those nades, those C4s are very common. Then you get into the interchangeable section, and for me, I do recommend that you try and upgrade your weapon as soon as possible. I think her weapon upgrade is really, really good. Again, this makes the SLC a little bit of a laser and helps with some of that longer range potential, so I would definitely recommend getting that, and the 40 bullets is also very nice. After you've bought that, I would recommend fully upgrading the incendiary grenade. I think it's very strong at the moment with the full upgrades. Then you can start looking at your perks, namely either get Nimble Hands or Replenish. You don't need both because they both have a reloading aspect to them. It just depends how much money you have at the particular time, whether Nimble Hands is better for you or whether Replenish you can afford that. From that point then I would definitely recommend getting Headstrong. I think Headstrong is a good perk for Scorch due to her up close and personal nature, and with the Soon buff where you can reapply the armor, I think it will be a really good addition to her kit. Normally I do add in that you could optionally get the melee weapon, but for Scorch she always has the melee weapon. There is no need to buy it. You already have it bought and can already use it. It's just whether you want to upgrade it. Personally, she's so close range anyway that you don't need the close range option of the melee, but if you do want to buy it and you do find it useful, then you could here as well. Other than that though, nothing is massively important. You can buy things as and when you have enough money or when you see the right opportunity for it. Let's now go into some playstyle tips. I'm going to start with her ability. Her ability Overheat is so great for that 1v1 potential, but you only have it for 10 seconds. So similar to Shark, once you activate that ability, and remember it makes a very audible noise so enemies know when you've done it and they know when it runs out, you need to be pressing your advantage. If you use your ability to wait around a corner for someone to come by and win the 1v1 that way, you've lost all your advantage. You need to be using it aggressively to try and get some sort of pick. Now, there's not always a great situation. Maybe you're having to run around a corner with this ability active, and in that case you could still get 1v1'd if they corner peek you and hit some headshots. However, you can alleviate some of these problems, mainly by using that incendiary grenade effectively. Here's a really good combo for you to try. If you know you've got to push around a corner, potentially going for a flank, but you think someone might be around that corner, I would recommend popping your ability, throwing your incendiary grenade at the corner so that anyone around it will get burnt and has to move from the position. When they're frazzled, when they're confused and slightly lower health, you can then push around. You know they're there because they've taken some damage from it, and you're prepared to take that fight with a health advantage, and then you should win that because Scorch is such a great 1v1 duelist. Another tip I have for you when you have that ability active is to not, at the longer ranges, be afraid of just doing a little bit of a tap fire. When you have that ability active and you only have those 10 seconds, you're not going to be able to consistently output damage with the SLC at longer ranges. Because of that recoil, you're going to miss a bunch of bullets. But what you can do is you can tap fire it, hit a little bit of a burst because they'll remain fairly accurate, and apply that burn damage, and then do the same again, and after 3 little short bursts with the burn damage, you might even be able to take some people out of range. This is quite a skillful thing for Scorchers to do, so do make sure you are being careful with it and you are being accurate with the little bursts that you do. The other option, however, is that you could switch to the salvo at this point and then use that because it is a lot more accurate at range. It doesn't do a lot more damage, but with the burn effect, it's pretty good. So you can try and go for that more accurate pistol play with the fire if that's what you choose. That is for when you have to play at range, say you're getting picked off or you're being held in angle and you can't leave and you just have to try and shoot somebody at range. But most of the time with Scorch, you want to be sticking at those closer ranges. Both her weapons, the Arbitrator and the SLC, and even her melee weapon that you can't throw, are so designed for short range. So you need to be playing her on these shorter range maps. Icarus is a really great spot for her because there's a good lot of tight corners that she can incendiary grenade and then push through. There's a lot of different options she has on that map specifically, as opposed to maps like Vice and Lockdown where she isn't as useful due to the longer lines of sight. My current opinion on Scorch is that she is a very fun rogue to play. It's fun to set your enemies on fire and you can do a lot of damage with that. But in terms of team play, in terms of like ranked and in competitive play, she's a bit lackluster. She doesn't have a lot of utility, and while she's great at 1v1ing, she must get up really close, and it is a longer range meta at the moment, meaning getting up close is quite difficult, and you're most likely going to be team shot, so that 1v1 advantage that you have doesn't translate to a 1v2 advantage. Unlike Shark, who has enough health to survive a 1v2, Scorch is going to get bursted down. I would definitely recommend her in Striker. I think she's great in that kind of mode. I think she's great for fragging out, and she's great when the enemy team is disorganized, but as you move into better teams and better ranks, you're going to struggle to do much with Scorch in her current state. I think personally she could use the removal of the shotgun for some sort of DMR. I think maybe even the devotion would be kind of cool on her, but realistically, she is built for short range at the moment, and that does mean she's a little lackluster in a lot of areas. Okay then guys, that's going to take us to the end of the video, and if you did enjoy, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. You can also come follow me on twitch.tv/Radthar Gaming to see live game commentaries, guides, Q&As, tournaments and scrims. All the links you're going to need are down in the description below, but for now guys, I hope you have a fantastic day, and remember, be loyal, be brave, be relentless, and I'll catch you in the next video.